All right. So I am Casey Ray Christopher, and I'm here to talk about how to engage students with soil health in a school garden. I am the author of the school garden curriculum, and I also work at Sisters High School and special education. And I've been working in the school greenhouse for a little bit here and getting our high schoolers out in the garden. So these are some suggestions to hopefully help people get some activities going for all season garden, activities and lessons. So let's see. So engaging students, I think this picture to the left really shows the range of students' experiences and excitement about soil. We have one student who has her hands dirty and she's extremely thrilled about it. And then there's a student to the right who is completely disgusted by the visceral experience of getting her hands in soil, which I think is just fantastic to have that range though, because it offers so much conversation and about culture and connection and experience with soil. So hopefully moving students from the right, the student to the right to the student to the left over these activities. And so when I think of engaging students with any activity, but in this case with soil, I like to think about these four main pieces. So the first part is exploration. And one of the teaching strategies that I picked up from science teachers that I've worked with is it's called like the ABC model. And it's activity before, I always want to say context, activity before content. And so what that does is it's just giving students a chance to just engage with the subject matter before really doing the deep dive into the whys and hows of it. So in this case, students can explore soil ecosystems. I feel like I always have magnifying glasses as my back pocket activity of just exploring and identifying things and asking questions about soil ecosystems or comparing different soil types. Really looking at worms and mushrooms and fungi and mycelium. And so really just starting to think about the pieces that make up the soil and what creates kind of that healthy soil. And so really just exploring and really understanding that context before diving deep into it. So moving from explore to investigate, really starting to take that experience and add questions to it, asking the whys and the whats and the hows. And so thinking about kind of the systems at play, the way that seeds and roots and cycles are all kind of participating into soil health and starting to really just create some wonderings about the soil. And then experimenting. So really from taking those questions and those key questions and then moving that into creating hypotheses and experiments. And this is also kind of like a seasonal progression. So, exploration can really be in the fall as students are returning to school, getting to know things, investigating can kind of be that transition into winter. And then experimentation is really, I think, the key for winter activities around soil health, because they can be done in a windowsill, even just planting these seeds in a container and really looking at the way that those plants are interacting with the soil itself. Looking at soil composition and maybe doing experiments around creating different types of soil mixtures, and then growing plants and seeing what happens, thinking about kind of the nutrient ratios in each of those things, each of those experiments, and then really analyzing how the plants are growing. So I find the winter experiment time to be really the key and the core of soil health exploration for students, because that's where they really get to start critically thinking about it and developing some really valuable skills that they can then apply in the spring, which is the fourth principle here, to the garden itself as kind of returning back into it. It's kind of waking up from its dormancy, and the students can then apply what they've experimented with and learned about in the winter, and then they can apply it in the spring through soil amendments, increased organic matter, and really thinking about ecosystem habitat. So these are just kind of some 4 things I think a lot of educators maybe they're doing all 4 of them, maybe they're doing a couple of them. And so I hope that people can look at these and maybe push a little bit farther or think a little bit more about adding this progression of student engagement into what they're already doing. You know, this can be over, like all 4 of these can be done over the whole year, be a school year, or they could be done in a month, or they could be even done in a week. Maybe it's a long day in the garden. They can do all 4 of these things, but I think if they're touching on all 4 of those, then they're really building that connection, engaging those students in the soil health. And then here's some examples of what soil health can look like, some activities that students can do. So thinking about, investigating soil ecosystems. That's always one of my go-tos, of grabbing, a sample of compost or a sample of soil from the forest or whatever I can get my hands on, and having students really explore and look at the systems, the ecosystems that are a part of that. Composting is another great one, even on a small scale, even if it's, or like a worm bin, just something small. Learning about plant roots and the way that plants are so talented, like just the way that they're built to hold on to soil. I recently worked with the biology class here, and one of the things that they did was we grew lettuce starts. And they were just really small, and they each got their one, and they had to very carefully, and they were so meticulous about it, very carefully take off all the soil from the plant roots without damaging the roots themselves. And the kids had, these little lettuce plants, and they were just gently brushing off the soil. And it was so neat to see them be so delicate about it, but then also realizing how strong those tiny little threads of roots are in holding the soil, and how talented they are at that. And then also kind of making some connections of the way that the plant roots grow and what does that look like in other parts of nature. Some kids were like, well, this looks like lightning, the way that it's kind of spread out. And so it was a really cool connection of this small system. But then also to see just how strong these like baby little lettuces were at holding soil. So that was a really neat connection to make. And then to be able to connect that to the way that the plant roots are taking up nutrients and the way they maximize, to take in water, just from that one, little activity. So plant roots are vital. Amending the soil, especially as like a spring activity, is like for me, spring is like a solution time, where we can really kind of apply and really think about how to grow soil health and cultivate it for plant success. And so really thinking about, you can do some soil tests, or really starting to analyze the organic matter that's in the soil and how to increase that. Doing some research in the winter around perennial plants and thinking about that balance between, what do students want to engage with, and, plant wise, what do they want to eat all year long? And then also, what are those perennial plants doing to the soil and increasing soil health? Are they adding something to it? Are they, adding certain nutrients like comfrey, are those leaves decomposing and really creating some rich fertilizer to the soil? Or, what are some benefits that can come with perennial plants? And then tracking crop rotation is another really fun one, I think, where you can think about how the plants that you planted before can benefit the ones after, and then kind of create a cycle. And there's some great activities around that. And then I would say, so key messages for students. I kind of, these kind of follow the same progression of explore, investigate, experiment, and apply. I kind of do that too with elementary, middle, and high school, where when I'm working with elementary students, I really focus on exploration, because the key there is building a personal connection to the soil and understanding that there's a community, and that, students are a part of that community, that soil health community. And so really just kind of having them explore and get, identifying those key community members, and realizing that there's a system at play. And so just to have that personal connection, that later on, as they start to experiment and investigate more, they can rely on those previous experiences that they've already had. They know what those key players are. And then in middle school, I kind of focus again on more on the investigation and experimentation. And so this is a chance for these middle school students who I find, their world is starting to expand. They're starting to really care a lot about their surroundings. And so to have them experiment and ask questions, and then kind of start to think about solutions to certain things, like they can start to build those critical skills that they're already developing. And it just kind of nurtures that. So they think about systems, they think about the relationship between parts of the soil ecosystem. Just as they're starting to kind of put themselves in their larger social ecosystem, they can also engage with that in the soil, with worms and fungi and macroinvertebrates. And so they're really starting to piece together those relationships, and starting to think about their responsibility to cultivate those relationships and enhance them. And then in high school, I really recommend starting to think about the application of, soil, like in this case with soil health, like identifying a local issue. In our school greenhouse, the biology class did a soil respiration test, which was really cool to see. And they were able to measure through carbon dioxide, like from the soil, if there was a lot of organisms in their soil compared to the native soil outside. And so through that experiment, then we're able to talk about, well, what are the ways that we increase organism habitat and like our soil organisms in our greenhouse? And what are some of the barriers that keep us from that, whether it's heat or lack of moisture. And so they were able to identify through this experiment an issue, and then starting to suggest their own solutions to it. So, and then again, like through comparative studies. So they were able to do it with the native soil outside and then with the inside soil. And so it was just really ripe for conversation. And once they were given the kind of, here's some solutions, what do you think is best? And they were able to argue these with each other. They were ready to go out and start applying those solutions. So I think this is a kind of the what, the why, and the how, kind of this progression between elementary, middle, and high school is what I focus on, and it's also what I would love to see in other schools. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I've missed.
Casey Ray, could you talk about some of the comments from the teachers from the in-person workshop? Was just getting more of a specific curriculum for students? You don't have to go in depth, but or maybe like where they could look for more of that information.
Yes, thank you. Other than my book, I really recommend these resources. The first resource is Soils for Teachers from the Soil Science Society of America. Still a mouthful. But I do recommend their K through 12 lesson plans. And they just have, it's really accessible information. So if teachers want to know more about kind of the subject matter and then be able to translate that to students, this is a really great resource that I rely on too. And they even have, I love their Ask a Scientist page where you can type in a question that maybe your class has, and then they can submit it, and then a scientist will get back and answer that question specifically around soil. And they also have a kids like website that's really engaging. And then, starting with soil for the Center for Ecoliteracy. I haven't used this app, but looked like it was really high quality, and it's for younger kids, ages 7 to 9. And then, yeah, digging deep K through 8th. I saw this was added, which was great. This is another good lesson set, but for K through 8th. So these are some starting points. I definitely recommend Soils for Teachers. They have a long history behind them that is it's really positive, but it's also just really accessible. Cool. Are there any other questions that I might have missed or anything you all think I could expand on?
I can't think of any. This is great.
Stop moving the screen. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Casey Ray.